I am Grace, 35 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Thomas and I built a beautiful life together over 7 years. Then I discovered his affair with Cassandra from his office. Most women would confront him immediately. Not me. I had something better in mind. As the HR director at my company, I had the power to hire her. She had no idea who I was. Let me tell you how watching her slowly crumble became my perfect revenge. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, hit that like and subscribe button before I reveal how I orchestrated the ultimate payback on both of them. My rise to becoming HR director did not happen overnight. It took 15 years of dedication, late nights, and sacrificing personal time to climb the corporate ladder at Anderson Consulting. I managed teams, created company-wide training programs, and finally earned my executive position 3 years ago. My colleagues respected me, my employees trusted me, and my superiors valued my judgment. I had built a reputation as tough but fair, with an eye for talent and a knack for placing people in positions where they would thrive. I met Thomas at a corporate mixer 8 years ago. Our companies had partnered on a major infrastructure project, and as a talented structural engineer, he was there representing his firm. I still remember what he wore that night, a navy blue suit that made his eyes sparkle when he laughed. We talked for hours, forgetting everyone else in the room. He was brilliant, ambitious, and surprisingly funny for an engineer. By the end of the night, I knew there was something special between us. Our relationship progressed like a fairy tale. 6 months of dating, weekend getaways to the coast, cooking dinners together, and sharing our dreams for the future. On our first anniversary, Thomas proposed during a surprise picnic at the Botanical Gardens where we had our third date. He had remembered every detail down to the same wine we drank that day. I cried when he got down on one knee, presenting a vintage-style emerald ring that he knew I would prefer over a traditional diamond. I said yes, before he even finished asking. Our wedding was perfect, not because it was extravagant, but because it felt true to us. We held it at a rustic vineyard with only 60 guests, our closest friends and family. My father, who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes as he walked me down the aisle. Thomas looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. We wrote our own vows, promising honesty, partnership, and unwavering support. I believed every word we said that day. The first 7 years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We bought a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood and spent weekends renovating it together. Our careers flourished side by side, each of us celebrating the other's accomplishments as if they were our own. We traveled when we could, creating photo albums full of memories from Costa Rica, Japan, and Italy. We discussed having children, agreeing to wait until we felt ready. Our life together felt purposeful and secure. The first signs of change were subtle. About 8 months ago, Thomas started working later than usual. At first, it was once or twice a week. Then it became the norm. He claimed his firm had taken on a major new client with impossible deadlines. I believed him because why wouldn't I? He had never given me reason to doubt. When he was home, he seemed distant, checking his phone constantly and stepping outside to take calls. Our conversations became superficial daily reports rather than genuine connection. Physical intimacy dwindled. When I reached for him at night, he was either already asleep or claimed exhaustion from work. I tried everything to reconnect. I cooked his favorite meals, planned weekend surprises, and gave him space when I thought that might help. One night I arranged a special dinner complete with candles and wine, wearing the dress he had once said was his favorite. He came home 2 hours late, barely touched his food, and fell asleep on the couch watching TV. I sat alone at our dining table, staring at the cold food and melted candles, feeling invisible in my own marriage. I told myself it was just a phase. Every marriage has rough patches. Thomas was under pressure at work, and once this big project finished, things would return to normal. I needed to be understanding, supportive, patient. That is what a good wife does, right? I repeated these thoughts like a mantra, ignoring the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. In retrospect, I was already losing him, but I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. That would come later with a discovery that would shatter every assumption I had about our life together. It happened on a Sunday morning. Thomas was in the shower, and his phone kept buzzing on the bedside table. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. I normally respected his privacy, never checking his messages or emails. That was part of our trust. But something felt off that morning. Call it intuition, or perhaps I had subconsciously noticed patterns I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I stood there staring at his phone, having an internal debate about whether to look. The buzzing stopped, then started again a minute later. 4 new message notifications from someone named Cass lit up his screen. The preview showed only the words, "Miss you so much." Last night was... My hands shook as I picked up his phone. He didn't have a password, another sign of our supposed transparency with each other. I tapped on the messages, telling myself I was overreacting, that Cass was probably a colleague, that the messages would have an innocent explanation. They didn't. The conversation history stretched back 3 months. Explicit messages, intimate photos, plans for hotel meetups, pet names, inside jokes, declarations that went far beyond physical attraction. They had a whole relationship playing out in these texts, complete with emotional intimacy and future plans. I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly unable to stand. The bathroom door was still closed, shower still running. Thomas hummed tunelessly, oblivious that his world was about to implode. Or rather, that mine already had. I scrolled through their conversation, each message a new wound. My vision blurred with tears. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't just sex. This was a full-blown affair with emotional investment, something that had been building while I was trying desperately to save our marriage. Who was Cass? The text didn't reveal her full name or where they had met. I kept scrolling, looking for clues, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid Thomas would hear it over the shower. I heard the water turn off. Quickly, I took photos of several incriminating messages with my own phone, then placed his back exactly where it had been. I wiped my face, took deep breaths, and pretended to be asleep when he came out. That day passed in a fog. I made excuses about not feeling well, which wasn't really a lie. Thomas went to his home office to catch up on work, his phone now carefully kept in his pocket. I lay in bed replaying our entire relationship in my mind, questioning every business trip, every late night, every unexplained absence. When he fell asleep that night, I began my investigation in earnest. I checked our joint credit card statements online, finding charges for upscale restaurants I had never been to, a jewelry store purchase from 2 months ago that I had never received, and several hotel charges in the city where we lived. Who stays at a hotel in their own city except to meet a lover? I searched his email next, finding reservation confirmations that matched the credit card charges. Then I found something else. Buried in his archived emails was a thread with the full name Cassandra Wilson. There was her work email signature, Business Development Manager at Rivertech Solutions. Rivertech was located in the office complex directly across from Thomas's firm. They probably saw each other every day. Perhaps met for coffee in the building's shared atrium. Passed each other in the parking garage. All while I sat at home making excuses for his absence. I spent $3,000 hiring a private investigator. It took him only 4 days to provide a comprehensive report. Cassandra Wilson, 27 years old, MBA from State University, employed at Rivertech for 2 years. Previously engaged, but broke it off 6 months ago, around when I suspected the affair began. The investigator provided photos of them together, entering a hotel, having lunch, walking hand in hand through a park on the other side of the city, where they thought no one would recognize them. I sat in my car, parked where I could see the entrance to Thomas's office building, and watched as she met him outside one day. She was beautiful, of course, younger than me, with long auburn hair and a confident stride. I watched them embrace briefly, professionally appropriate to outside observers. but I could see the lingering touch, the private smile. She wore the necklace that appeared on our credit card statement, a small silver pendant that caught the sunlight. That night I lay awake beside my sleeping husband, the man I had built my life around, and felt something harden inside me. The initial shock and pain crystallized into something colder, more focused. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I didn't want tears and accusations and promises to change that would ultimately prove hollow. No, I wanted something else. Something that would make them both understand exactly what they had done. Not just to me, but to themselves. I have never considered myself a vindictive person. Before this, if you had asked me how I would react to infidelity, I probably would have said I would immediately confront the situation, possibly attempt counseling, and likely end the marriage with as much dignity as possible. The desire for revenge surprised me both in its intensity and in how quickly it overcame my initial impulse to simply leave. That sleepless night beside Thomas, I cycled through every emotion imaginable. Grief for what I had lost, rage at their betrayal, self-doubt about what I could have done differently, humiliation at being made a fool. By morning, these feelings had coalesced into a cold, clear determination. I would not give Thomas the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation. I would not give Cassandra the relief of knowing she had been discovered. Neither of them deserved the clean break that would come from an immediate divorce. No, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making any permanent decisions. At work that day, I struggled to focus my mind, constantly returning to images of them together. During a mindless meeting, I opened LinkedIn on my phone and searched for Cassandra Wilson. Her profile appeared immediately polished and professional. MBA, progressive career advancement, glowing recommendations. Under her activity, I noticed something interesting. She had recently liked several posts about job hunting and career changes. Was she looking to leave Rivertech? I scrolled through her recent activity and found a comment on a career advice post. Ready for a new challenge after 2 great years, but finding the right fit is harder than expected. That was when the idea first took shape. As HR director, I oversaw all hiring for our company. We had recently approved a new business development position in my division, focusing on expanding our corporate training programs to new markets. The role would report directly to me. It seemed too perfect, too convenient. Was I really considering what I thought I was considering, hiring my husband's mistress, positioning her directly under my supervision without her knowing who I was? The ethical implications troubled me briefly. Using my professional position for personal vendetta crossed several boundaries. But then I remembered how they had crossed the most sacred boundary in my marriage, and my hesitation evaporated. I pulled up the job description that had been drafted for the new position. It aligned almost perfectly with Cassandra's qualifications. With a few tweaks, I could make it seem like it had been written specifically for someone with her background. Next came the question of identity. Cassandra had never met me, but she surely knew Thomas was married. She might know my name, possibly what I did for a living. I needed to create distance between Grace Williams, wife of Thomas, and the person who would interview and hire her. Fortunately, my company was large enough that I had options. In official communications, I often used my middle name Elizabeth, signing emails as G. Elizabeth Williams. For this plan, I would become simply Elizabeth Williams, different enough to avoid immediate connection, especially if she wasn't actively looking for such a link. I would need allies, people who could help with preliminary interviews while keeping my involvement minimal until the crucial moment. My assistant Danielle, who had been with me for 5 years, was fiercely loyal and discreet. She could handle initial screenings without questions. As for in-person meetings, I rarely used social media and had always been careful about my online presence. A quick search of my name yielded very few photos, most from professional publications, where I looked significantly different than in daily life. A pair of glasses, I didn't normally wear a different hairstyle, more formal attire than what Thomas would have described if he talked about me. These small changes would be enough to create reasonable doubt. That evening I told Thomas I would be working late for the next few weeks on a special project. He barely looked up from his phone, probably texting her at that very moment. His disinterest was now an advantage. He had become so disconnected from my professional life that he would have no idea what positions we were hiring for. I crafted the job posting carefully, emphasizing aspects that would appeal to someone with Cassandra's background while remaining legitimately within our company's needs. I instructed our HR coordinator to post it on platforms where Cassandra would be likely to see it, including a professional group I had noticed she was a member of on LinkedIn. Then I waited, alternating between doubt about whether this elaborate plan would work and intense anticipation at the possibility that it might. Each night I maintained the facade of normalcy, with Thomas watching him check his phone and make excuses to take calls in another room. Each day I checked the applications for the position, waiting for the one name I was looking for. 1 week passed, then another. I began to worry that she wouldn't apply, that my plan would dissolve before it even began. Then on a Tuesday morning, Danielle placed a stack of new applications on my desk with a yellow sticky note marking one particular resume. Cassandra Wilson had taken the bait. The resume in my hands represented both Cassandra's professional achievements and my first real victory. Her application was impressive, I had to admit. Excellent academic credentials, a track record of exceeding targets at Rivertech, thoughtful cover letter, addressing exactly what we had outlined in the job posting. Under different circumstances, she would have been a strong candidate regardless. Reading through her materials, I felt a strange mix of resentment and reluctant respect. She was clearly intelligent and ambitious. What did that say about Thomas, that he had chosen someone accomplished rather than a meaningless fling? Somehow that made it worse. This wasn't just about physical attraction. He had found someone he connected with on multiple levels, perhaps even in ways he no longer did with me. I pushed that thought aside. It didn't matter why he had chosen her. What mattered was my plan. I instructed Danielle to schedule a phone screening, standard protocol for promising candidates. She would conduct it while I listened silently, getting my first experience of Cassandra's voice and personality without revealing myself. "She sounds confident," Danielle said after the call. "Good communication skills, clear about her objectives, asking all the right questions about the role." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Let's bring her in for an in-person interview next week. Put her on my calendar, but list it as a general candidate interview, no name." The day before Cassandra's interview, I prepared meticulously. I styled my hair differently, pulling it back into a severe bun, unlike my usual loose waves. I applied makeup more heavily than usual, with dramatic eyeshadow that changed the appearance of my eyes. Most importantly, I wore glasses with fashionable but substantial frames that significantly altered my face. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I chose a pantsuit in charcoal gray, far from the jewel tones Thomas knew I preferred. I even adjusted my manner of speaking, adopting a slightly more clipped, formal tone than my natural voice. Small changes individually, but together they created enough difference to prevent recognition, especially from someone who had never actually met me. When Cassandra walked into my office the next day, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the woman who had been sleeping with my husband for months. The woman who had received gifts purchased with our joint account. The woman who thought she could build her happiness on the ruins of mine. She was even more striking in person than in the investigators' photos. Tall and slender, with perfect posture and a confident walk. She wore a navy blue dress that managed to be both professional and flattering, her auburn hair falling in soft waves to her shoulders. The silver necklace Thomas had bought her gleamed at her throat. "Ms. Wilson, please have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "I'm Elizabeth Williams, Director of Human Resources and head of the Corporate Development Initiative this position will be supporting." She smiled, extending her hand for a firm handshake. "Thank you for this opportunity, Ms. Williams. I've been following your company's expansion for some time and was excited to see this position open up." Her voice was pleasant with a slight Southern accent. I wondered if Thomas found that charming, this hint of geographic difference from my own neutral Midwestern speech. I conducted the interview with professional precision, asking challenging questions that would test both her qualifications and her ability to handle pressure. She responded well, articulate, and thoughtful, occasionally revealing a flash of genuine passion for her work. Under different circumstances, I would have been impressed. Throughout our conversation, I watched for any sign that she recognized me or my name, any flicker of discomfort or sudden realization. There was nothing. To her, I was simply a potential employer, evaluating her suitability for a position she wanted. Your resume mentions experience with market expansion strategies, I said. Tell me about a specific campaign you developed and how you measured its success. As she launched into a detailed explanation of a project at Rivertech, I found myself thinking about how Thomas must see her. Bright, ambitious, engaging. Younger than me without the complications of a long shared history. A fresh start, perhaps. The thought stung more than I expected. That's very impressive, I said when she finished, keeping my voice even. Now, this position would require occasional travel and frequent late hours, especially during launch phases. Would that be a problem for you? Not at all, she replied quickly. I'm fully committed to my career right now and appreciate roles that challenge me. My personal circumstances allow for flexible hours. I bet they do. I thought, bitterly imagining her and Thomas planning their rendezvous around her flexible hours. The interview continued for nearly an hour. By the end, I had gathered everything I needed to know. Cassandra was qualified, ambitious, and completely unaware of who I really was. She was also desperate for this job, something I could sense beneath her confident exterior. The comment about being ready for a new challenge hadn't been professional posturing. She genuinely wanted to leave Rivertech. Well, Ms. Wilson, I think we've covered the essentials, I said, standing to signal the end of the interview. We have a few more candidates to see, but you can expect to hear from us by early next week. She stood smoothing her dress. Thank you for your time. I'm very interested in the position and believe I could bring significant value to your team. One last question, I said, unable to resist. Our company values loyalty highly. Would you say that's a quality you possess? For the first time, I saw a flicker of something almost like discomfort cross her face, quickly replaced by a practiced smile. Absolutely, she said. When I commit to something, I'm all in. I smiled back, the expression not reaching my eyes. Wonderful. We'll be in touch. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, turning over the interaction in my mind. Part of me had hoped I would dislike her completely, that she would be incompetent or unpleasant, making my plan feel more justified. Instead, I found myself facing the uncomfortable realization that under different circumstances, I might have actually hired her on merit alone. That night, Thomas came home late again. He kissed my cheek absently, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume. I wondered if he had just come from seeing her. How was your day? He asked, the question automatic, his attention already drifting to his phone. Productive, I replied. I interviewed a very interesting candidate today. He nodded, not really listening. That's nice, honey? 2 days later, I instructed Danielle to offer Cassandra the position with a salary 15% higher than she had requested, the golden handcuffs that would bind her to my plan. She accepted, immediately available to start in 2 weeks. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real work would begin. Cassandra's first day at Anderson Consulting arrived with perfect theatrical timing. The previous evening, Thomas had been particularly distant, canceling our dinner plans with a transparent excuse about work emergencies. I knew he was with her, probably helping her celebrate her new job, unaware of the irony that he was congratulating her on walking straight into my carefully laid trap. I arrived at the office early, making final preparations. My transformation into Elizabeth Williams was now complete, with the addition of a different perfume, subtle vocal modulation, and even slightly altered handwriting for any documents she might see. These small details mattered. They would prevent any connection between the stern HR director she was about to meet and any descriptions Thomas might have shared of his wife. At 8:30 a.m., Danielle brought Cassandra to my office for orientation. She looked nervous but excited, dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored black pants. The necklace from Thomas was conspicuously absent today, replaced by simple pearl studs. A more professional look for her first day. How considerate. "Welcome to Anderson, Ms. Wilson," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I trust Danielle has given you the basic tour and new employee packet." "Yes, thank you," she replied, sitting with perfect posture. "Everyone has been very welcoming." "Good," I said briskly. "Let's discuss your first project." I outlined an assignment that was technically within her job description, but particularly challenging, involving a market analysis for a potential new service line with an aggressive 2-week deadline. The parameters were intentionally vague, the expectations deliberately high, and the resources limited. "This will be a good opportunity for you to demonstrate your capabilities," I explained. "I'll need daily progress reports and a preliminary assessment by Friday. Questions?" She looked slightly overwhelmed, but recovered quickly. "No, I understand the parameters. I'll get started right away." "Excellent. Danielle will show you to your office." Her workspace was strategically positioned where I could observe her without being obvious. Over the next few days, I watched as Cassandra threw herself into the project. She arrived early, stayed late, and rarely took breaks. Her determination was actually impressive. If I hadn't known who she was, I might have admired her work ethic. By Thursday, dark circles had appeared under her eyes. She was clearly struggling with the intentionally convoluted assignment, but hadn't asked for help or clarification. Pride or fear, I wondered. Perhaps both. When Friday arrived, she requested a meeting to present her preliminary findings. The analysis was actually quite good considering what she had to work with. She had identified several promising market segments and outlined potential approaches, backing everything with solid data. "This is adequate," I said coolly after her presentation, watching her face fall slightly at the faint praise. "But I see several gaps in your methodology. The demographic analysis is superficial, and you've completely overlooked the regulatory considerations for the Midwest market." These criticisms were largely invented. Her work was thorough, but I needed to establish a pattern of never being quite satisfied, of moving the goalposts whenever she approached them. "I apologize," she said, making notes. "I'll address those issues in the final report." "See that you do. And I'll need a complete revision of the financial projections by Monday morning." This meant she would have to work through the weekend, her first at the new job. I saw the carefully controlled surprise on her face, the quick mental adjustment as she calculated what this would mean for her personal life, for her time with Thomas. "Of course," she said smoothly. "I'll have it ready." That night, Thomas told me he needed to go into the office on Saturday to catch up on a project. The lie came so easily to him, now delivered while he scrolled through his phone, probably seeing the messages from Cassandra explaining why she had to cancel their plans. "Actually," I said, "why don't we do something together this weekend? It's been a while." He looked up momentarily, startled by the suggestion. "I really can't, Grace. This deadline is critical. Maybe next weekend." "Sure," I replied, watching him return to his phone. "Next weekend." Over the following weeks, I continued my strategy. Cassandra would complete tasks, and I would find problems, sometimes legitimate, but often manufactured. I assigned her to difficult internal clients, changed requirements midstream, and created situations where she had to navigate complex office politics without adequate context. Through it all, she remained professional and determined, though increasingly stressed. I could see it in the tension around her eyes, the way she sometimes stared blankly at her computer when she thought no one was watching. I monitored her relationship with Thomas through his behavior at home and occasional glimpses of his texts when he was careless. Their meetings became less frequent as her workload increased. Their messages showed strain. "Can't tonight. Have to finish this report. Again, we haven't seen each other in over a week. I'm sorry. This job is more demanding than I expected. Is it worth it? I need this. Please understand." 1 month into her employment, I raised the stakes. During a department meeting, I publicly questioned one of her recommendations, pointing out flaws in front of the entire team. It wasn't something I would normally do to any employee, but this wasn't a normal situation. "Your proposal lacks strategic insight, Ms. Wilson," I said, watching her face flush with embarrassment. "Perhaps you should consult with Jamie on the appropriate framework before our next meeting." Jamie was a junior analyst who had been with us for just 6 months. The suggestion that Cassandra needed guidance from someone far less experienced was a calculated humiliation. After the meeting, she stopped by my office, visibly struggling to maintain composure. "Ms. Williams, I appreciate feedback, but I'm concerned that public criticism might undermine my ability to build effective relationships with the team." It was a reasonable professional request. In normal circumstances, I would have respected an employee for having the courage to address such an issue directly. "I understand your concern," I replied evenly. "However, in this organization, we believe in transparent communication. If your work meets standards, you'll receive appropriate recognition. If not, you'll hear that too, regardless of the setting." She nodded stiffly. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." As she turned to leave, I added, "The Henderson client has requested a complete revision of the training materials by tomorrow morning. I forwarded their comments to your email." The Henderson account was our most demanding client, known for vague feedback and impossible deadlines. The revision would keep her at the office until midnight at minimum. "I'll take care of it," she said, shoulders tense but voice steady. That evening I heard Thomas on the phone in his study, his voice low and frustrated. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone told me everything I needed to know. Another canceled date. Another disappointment. The cracks in their relationship were beginning to show. 2 months into Cassandra's employment, the transformation was visible. The confident, polished professional from the interview had been replaced by someone perpetually anxious, second-guessing every decision, isolated from colleagues who had learned to keep their distance from anyone in my apparent disfavor. She made her first major mistake during a presentation to our executive team. After weeks of sleep deprivation and constant criticism, she mixed up key statistics, presenting incorrect data that was immediately noticed by our CFO. I watched from the back of the room as she stumbled through an apology, trying to locate the correct information in her disorganized notes. I could have stepped in, smoothed things over, as I might have done for another employee. Instead, I remained silent, letting her founder and lose credibility with the leadership team. Afterward, she went straight to the restroom. Following a hunch, I went in a few minutes later, hearing the unmistakable sound of quiet sobbing from one of the stalls. I washed my hands slowly, waiting until she emerged, eyes red and face freshly washed. She froze when she saw me, clearly horrified to be caught in such a vulnerable moment by the very person responsible for her misery. "Professional tip, Ms. Wilson," I said coolly. "Save the emotional displays for after hours. Perception matters in this business." She straightened her shoulders with visible effort. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't, and I'll need a complete written account of what went wrong today with corrective action steps by end of day." That night I heard Thomas arguing on the phone again, his voice rising enough for me to catch fragments. "This isn't working. Barely see each other anymore. Not the same person lately." When he came to bed, he was distant in a new way. Not just disengaged, but actively troubled. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. My plan was working. Their perfect affair was crumbling under the weight of real-life stress, the kind that tests any relationship. The next morning, Cassandra called in sick, her first absence since starting. Through Danielle, I learned she had requested a mental health day, citing extreme stress and sleep deprivation. I should have felt triumphant. This was exactly what I had wanted to see her break down, to make her suffer as I had suffered. Instead, I felt an unexpected twinge of something almost like guilt. I had become the villain in this story, using my professional power to deliberately harm someone's mental health. But then I remembered finding those texts, discovering the hotel receipts, watching them together outside his office. I remembered every lie Thomas had told me, every night I had spent alone while he was with her. My resolve hardened again. This wasn't just petty revenge. This was justice. They had conspired to destroy my life, my marriage, my sense of self. Why shouldn't they experience consequences? I sent Cassandra an email during her sick day outlining all the work that would be waiting for her return and expressing concern about her ability to meet the demands of the position. The implied threat of termination was clear. She responded within minutes, assuring me she would be back tomorrow ready to tackle everything on the list. Even in her distress, she wouldn't give me the satisfaction of backing down. The game continued, but I was beginning to realize that breaking Cassandra professionally wasn't enough. She was resilient, determined to prove herself despite everything I threw at her. And while her relationship with Thomas was strained, they were still together, still stealing whatever moments they could. I needed something more definitive, a final act that would bring everything crashing down around them both. The opportunity presented itself unexpectedly at a client dinner I couldn't reschedule. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place Thomas and I used to go for special occasions. I was seated with our client and several team members, including Cassandra, who looked exhausted but professionally presentable. Halfway through the main course, I saw Thomas enter the restaurant with two colleagues. My heart stopped for a moment. This wasn't part of my plan, this accidental convergence of my two worlds. Thomas saw me first. The shock on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. Then his eyes moved to our table, landing on Cassandra, who had her back to the entrance and hadn't noticed him yet. I watched the color drain from his face as he made the connection. His wife and his mistress sitting at the same table. Impossible, except it wasn't. When Cassandra turned following the sudden shift in conversation as others at our table greeted Thomas's group, I saw the exact moment she understood. Her eyes darted between Thomas and me, confusion turning to horror as she put the pieces together. Elizabeth Williams. Grace Elizabeth Williams. The wife Thomas had mentioned but never introduced her to. The woman whose marriage she had been destroying for months. Her boss. Her tormentor. The look on her face was everything I had imagined in my darkest moments of planning this revenge. Complete and utter devastation. The collapse of her entire world in a single moment of revelation. What I hadn't anticipated was how hollow it would feel. The restaurant seemed to freeze in that moment, though in reality only seconds passed. Our client continued talking, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding. Thomas's colleagues were choosing a table. But between Thomas, Cassandra, and me, time stood still as 7 months of deception collapsed into a single point of terrible clarity. Thomas recovered first, nodding stiffly in our direction, before allowing the host to lead his group to a table on the opposite side of the restaurant. Cassandra excused herself shortly after, presumably heading to the restroom. I watched her walk away, steps carefully measured despite the visible trembling of her hands. I should have felt triumphant. This accidental collision of worlds had accelerated my plan beyond what I could have orchestrated deliberately. Yet instead of satisfaction, I felt strangely empty, as though reaching the climax of this revenge plot had revealed its fundamental hollowness. The remainder of the dinner passed in a blur. I performed my role as host, automatically discussing contract details and making appropriate small talk while my mind raced through the implications of what had just happened. From the corner of my eye, I saw Thomas's group leave early, his face ashen as he glanced in our direction one final time. When Cassandra returned to the table, her makeup had been freshly applied, but nothing could hide the shock still evident in her eyes. She participated minimally in the conversation, speaking only when directly addressed. I recognized the look of someone desperately maintaining composure until they could escape to process what had happened. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, anticipating Cassandra would either resign immediately or confront me. I was prepared for both possibilities. What I didn't expect was to find her already at her desk, working with a focused intensity that seemed almost manic. Around noon, an email appeared in my inbox. Request for private meeting end of day. Cassandra Wilson. No subject line, no explanation. Just a direct professional request. I replied with a single word, approved. At 5:30. After most employees had left for the day, there was a knock at my office door. Cassandra entered without waiting for my response. Gone was the nervous, exhausted woman of recent weeks. In her place stood someone transformed by the clarity that comes with having nothing left to lose. "You knew all along," she said, closing the door behind her. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I removed my glasses, the prop I no longer needed. Yes. Everything. The job offer, the impossible workload, the constant criticism. It was all deliberate. Yes. She sank into the chair across from me, a strange laugh escaping her. I should have seen it. Elizabeth. Grace Elizabeth. It was right there. People rarely look for connections they aren't expecting to find. I replied, studying her carefully. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Watching me fall apart day by day, was it satisfying?" The question deserved an honest answer, if only because we had moved beyond the point where lies served any purpose. "At first, yes," I admitted. "Seeing you struggle gave me a sense of justice. You and Thomas had caused me so much pain. I wanted you both to experience consequences." She nodded slowly as though this confirmation aligned with what she had already concluded. "I understand why you hate me." "Do you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I destroyed your marriage. I slept with your husband for months. I knowingly participated in betraying you." She held my gaze steadily. "What I don't understand is why you didn't just fire me once you had your revenge. Why keep me here suffering day after day?" The question made me realize something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. My plan had evolved beyond simple revenge against Cassandra. It had become about Thomas too, about watching their relationship disintegrate under pressure just as mine had. "It wasn't just about punishing you," I said finally. "It was about both of you, about destroying what you had built on the ruins of my marriage." A tear slipped down her cheek, but her voice remained steady. "There's something you should know. Thomas told me you two were separated, that you had agreed to divorce but were keeping it quiet for professional reasons." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. Not the lie itself, but the extent of it. Thomas hadn't just cheated. He had constructed an entire alternative reality to justify his actions. "When did he tell you this?" I asked. "From the beginning. He said you lived separate lives, just maintaining appearances, that you had both agreed to see other people discreetly." She wiped away the tear. "I believed him. I wouldn't have continued otherwise. I have never knowingly been the other woman before." I wanted to dismiss her explanation as self-serving, but something in her expression suggested sincerity. Had she truly believed she wasn't breaking up a marriage but rather dating someone in the process of ending one? "You never questioned why he kept your relationship secret, why you never came to our home, why there was never any actual progress on this supposed divorce." She looked down, shame coloring her features. "I asked, many times. He always had explanations, legal complications, concerns about work, property issues." She met my eyes again. "I was naive and in love. I chose to believe him." The word love struck me with unexpected force. Of course, this wasn't just an affair for her either. She had genuine feelings for Thomas built on a foundation of lies he had constructed. "After last night," she continued, "I called him, demanded the truth. He admitted everything, that you had no idea about us until recently, that there was never any separation, that he had been lying to both of us for months." I felt a strange sense of vindication mixed with renewed anger. Thomas had been playing us both, creating elaborate deceptions to maintain his double life. "He tried to blame you, you know," Cassandra said quietly. "Said you were cold, career-obsessed, that you had grown apart. Classic justification for cheating." "And what did you say?" A bitter smile crossed her face. "I told him that in the past 2 months, working for his supposedly cold, career-obsessed wife, I had seen more integrity and strength of character than he had demonstrated in our entire relationship. Then I ended it." Her words caught me off guard. After everything I had put her through, she was defending me. You ended things with Thomas. She nodded. Last night. For good. I don't want any part of someone who could lie so completely to two women who trusted him. She took a deep breath. I also came to return this. From her purse, she withdrew the silver necklace I had seen her wear so often, the one Thomas had purchased with our joint account. She placed it on my desk, the pendant catching the late afternoon light. I didn't know it was bought with your money, she said. I never would have accepted it if I had known. I stared at the necklace, this small, tangible symbol of Thomas's betrayal of us both. In that moment, something shifted in my perception of the situation. Cassandra wasn't just the other woman, the enemy I had been methodically destroying. She was also, in her own way, a victim of Thomas's deceptions. What happens now? She asked, interrupting my thoughts. I assume you'll fire me. I should have said yes. It would be the clean ending to this messy situation. She would leave Thomas and I would divorce, and we would all move forward separately. Yet something made me hesitate. What if I didn't? I heard myself ask. She looked at me in confusion. I don't understand. I wasn't sure I understood either. The words had emerged before the thought was fully formed, but as I considered it, an alternative path began to take shape. Thomas lied to us both, I said slowly. He manipulated and betrayed us in different but equally damaging ways. Perhaps there's a better form of justice than what I've been pursuing. What are you suggesting? You're talented, Cassandra. Despite everything I've put you through, your work has shown genuine promise. The flaws I've pointed out were largely manufactured to break you down. I leaned forward. What if instead of continuing this cycle of destruction, we redirected that energy toward what? Toward Thomas. Toward holding him accountable for what he's done to both of us. She studied me for a long moment. You want us to work together after everything that's happened? Strange as it sounds, yes. I surprised myself with how much I meant it. You know half of Thomas's deception. I know the other half. Together we have the complete picture of a man who thought he could play with people's lives without consequences. A slow, uncertain smile touched her lips. That's not what I expected from this conversation. None of this is what I expected, I admitted. But I'm tired of letting Thomas's actions dictate my behavior. The woman who conceived this revenge plan isn't someone I recognize anymore, isn't someone I want to be. So what exactly are you proposing? First, a transfer to a different department where your skills will be better utilized and appropriately recognized. Second, a fresh start professionally with a clean slate. And third, I paused, hardly believing what I was about to suggest. A collaboration on ensuring Thomas faces appropriate consequences for his actions. Cassandra considered this for several moments, her expression thoughtful. You're serious, aren't you? Completely? She extended her hand across the desk. Then I accept. All three proposals. As we shook hands, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation. The weight of anger and bitterness I had been carrying for months seemed to lighten, replaced by something that felt surprisingly like hope. That evening I returned home to find Thomas waiting, his face grave. He had clearly been preparing for a confrontation, rehearsing explanations and excuses. What he wasn't prepared for was my calmness. We need to talk, Thomas, I said, setting down my bag. Grace, I can explain about last night, he began. No, you can't, I interrupted gently. But that's okay. You don't need to try anymore. His confusion was evident. What do you mean? I mean, I've known about you and Cassandra for months, since before I hired her. The color drained from his face. You hired her, knowing about us. Yes, it was my revenge. Bringing her into my company, making her life difficult, watching your relationship fall apart under the pressure. He stared at me, struggling to process this revelation. That's insane, Grace. Vindictive and cruel. Yes, I agreed. It was. And I'm not proud of becoming that person. But I'm done with it now. All of it. Including our marriage. Grace, please, he began, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can fix this. Go to counseling. Start over." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix, Thomas. You didn't make a mistake. You made hundreds of deliberate choices day after day to lie to me, to live a double life, to tell Cassandra we were separated when we weren't. She told you that," he asked, anger flashing across his face. "She told me everything, just as I told her everything." I met his eyes steadily. "No more secrets, Thomas. No more lies." "So what happens now?" he asked, echoing Cassandra's earlier question. "Now I move forward. I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from them tomorrow with the divorce papers." Just like that. 7 years of marriage over. It's been over for months, Thomas. We're just finally acknowledging it. As I walked away, I felt none of the satisfaction I had imagined my revenge would bring. Instead, I experienced something unexpected: peace. The woman who had plotted elaborate revenge was fading, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and ultimately more compassionate. The perfect revenge, I realized, wasn't about making others suffer. It was about reclaiming my own life and refusing to let betrayal define me. 1 year later, my divorce was finalized. I received a fair settlement that acknowledged Thomas's financial deceptions discovered during the proceedings. My career continued to flourish with a promotion to Vice President of Operations that came with new challenges and rewards. Cassandra thrived in her new position in our product development department, her talents recognized and valued. We never became close friends, our shared history made that impossible, but we developed a respectful professional relationship built on the unusual foundation of our shared experience. Thomas faced professional consequences when his pattern of ethical lapses extended to his work. He eventually relocated to another state, starting over with his reputation diminished, but hopefully with lessons learned. As for me, I gradually rebuilt my sense of self independent of my failed marriage. I discovered new interests, strengthened friendships I had neglected, and eventually opened myself to the possibility of love again, this time with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. The woman who plotted revenge had served her purpose in my journey, but she wasn't who I wanted to be. In letting her go, I found something far more valuable than the satisfaction of seeing others suffer. I found freedom from the pain that had driven me to become her in the first place. Looking back, I realized the perfect revenge wasn't what I had originally planned. It was living well, healing completely, and moving forward without carrying the weight of betrayal. It was reclaiming my story as my own. Have you ever been in a situation where seeking revenge seemed like the only option? Did you go through with it or find another way forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening to my journey from darkness back to light. Remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's actions determine your worth or happiness.